The runner was my avatar, but in niching down into the runner didn't limit my business. We were literally the place, and we had people from all over New England that came to us because we were the place that runners went. But what happened is people that aren't really runners knew we were treating that clientele. And then they're a CrossFitter. They run during CrossFit and they want a motivated, sports medicine minded, healthy environment. So then they came. Then we started working with a local ballet studio because we were working with athletes, and ballet dancers are friggin' athletes, man. They are so in shape. So we started working with ballet dancers. So niching down allowed me to grow the business, and we constantly kept that avatar in mind. And we literally had the best clients in the world. Kick it.
Welcome to Strata Stories. My name is Tom Schreiber. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Strata. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. On today's episode, Paul Singh, the CEO of Strata PT, talks with Michael Silva, a PT who opened his practice in 2003, built multiple locations, and eventually sold it in 2021. Paul and Michael talk through why niching down is a golden ticket to growing a practice, how to partner with CrossFit gyms, running clubs, and other parts of your local community, and how Michael motivated his staff by developing programs around their passions. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo. Now, without further delay, here's today's episode.
I went to undergraduate here at University of Rhode Island. I got a degree in exercise physiology, planned on going into PT school. I wasn't the greatest student, so I didn't get into PT school right away. So I took a year off, worked in healthcare, worked in the fitness, PT. I was like the connector between the PT world and the fitness world. Learned a lot about physician referrals and PT and post-rehab through all this, which was eye-opening. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to try this one more time, applied and got in the second round, which was awesome. Went to PT school, left there, graduated in 98, got my first job with, I don't know if you guys remember Health South. So I got a job as one of 250,000 employees at Health South and worked there for 2 years. This was in Massachusetts, moved back to Rhode Island, worked for a smaller private practice. And about 3.5 years into my career, I didn't know what the term was because we didn't have it back there, but I was burnt out. I wasn't happy. I wasn't working with the clients I wanted to work with. I didn't like the structure of everything that I was seeing. I just was getting really discouraged with my profession way too early in my career. I invested a lot of time, a lot of money. So it was a pretty emotional time at that point. And having a long talk with my wife, and I realized I loved being a PT. I wanted to help people, which is why I got into this. I just need to do it on my own terms. So at that point in May of 2003, I had my first child. I turned 30, and I became fully responsible for the financial health of my whole family. So I looked at my wife and I said, if I don't grow up now, it ain't ever going to happen. Let's do this. That's when I started what was called Foundation Performance. Sports medicine was the name of my practice. And then I grew that from me being the janitor, the biller, the greeter, the therapist, the trainer. I did everything. You name it, I did it. I worked 7 days a week building my practice, the same stories you hear from everyone. And then I grew it into, I was about to open my fourth office before we decided to sell. And that's a whole nother podcast on the exact reason, but it was just the right time for me. I wanted to do other things. I'd had a lot of success clinically. I built a practice that focused in a niche of the running world. So I was fortunate enough to work with 15 Olympic athletes from all over the world. I traveled the country talking on different topics and running and collaboration with the running world and healthcare and running injuries and that whole type of thing. Built an amazing staff of people that worked for me over the years and decided I wanted to do something different. So sold at the end of 2021. I was part of the new company for a while and then exited amicably. I still talk to the people who bought us, and they're going on to do good things. And I'm doing my own good things in a separate way as well.
So there's a couple different ways I wanted to go on this, and really just comes down to what excites you and what you want to talk about. But one of the things I thought was interesting about your story is, just to start, is that first is it seemed like you understood the value of niching down earlier. A lot of people I meet, particularly as they start their practice, don't quite understand. They think implicitly, okay, I'm going to just get all the licensing. I'm going to get it all set up. I'm going to put my shingle out there, and then magically people are going to walk in with injuries and I'm going to fix them. But in your storyline, you kind of understood the value of niching at first, and I'd love to understand how you got there, so early in your journey. But on a related note, I also understand you started out as a cash-based practice and then began accepting insurance. And I'm kind of curious what drove that, because that right there is like a divisive topic, I think, between a lot of people. So if we could time travel back to 2003,
Sure.
Was your undergrad in marketing or something like that?
No, I had zero. My undergrad was in exercise physiology. I had zero knowledge and skills in marketing and business and everything. So a lot of what I learned through mistakes. And I didn't know the value of niching down as I was doing it. I did it selfishly. Like I told you, like I had burnout and I wanted to do my own thing. I've been a very active person. I wanted to work with like fitness forward, serious health conscious people who wanted to get better. At one of the clinics I was working at, I was just seeing a lot of unmotivated clients. Everyone had a lawyer involved with them. It was just a certain clientele. Not that they don't need to be served, but it was a very unmotivating clientele. And I felt like I was wasting my time. No one wanted to be there. They were forced to be there for many different reasons. And that wasn't me. I was hired to be, and I was trained, and my passion was sports medicine and keeping people active, keeping healthy people healthy was my mantra. So that's what I did. And I started that as a cash-based practice because I wanted nothing to do with health insurances. Again, selfishly, I did that. And this was before, 2003, cash-based practices weren't really a thing. They're much more popular now. I must have started it. No, I'm just kidding. It wasn't me. But I was doing it back then.
We'll give you credit for it. You heard it here first.
But I was just doing it for selfish reasons. Like I had an avatar, which I know that term now, of who I wanted to treat and who filled my cup, who was going to keep me passionate and keep me in the industry. So when I opened the cash-based practice, all I did was keep that person in mind. So my wife was in the background the whole time. She's a therapist as well, but she was home raising our first child. And we have 2 children. So she's been in and out of the business and was always kind of in the background as my coach and my sounding board and my advisor. So at one point she's like, you know what, we're doing okay. And like, you're busy and, we're making decent money, but you're sending a lot of people over to your friends' clinics because you're not accepting their insurance. Like what would happen if we did? So I'm like, all right, let's do it. So we did. Then it's just like all hell broke loose. Like then everyone started to come in. I was already starting to hire people. Like I had a front desk and I think I had a PT at that time, but then it just blew up. And then I kind of went big. Like you were talking about, I accepted all insurances. And then as I'm learning more and more through the help of some extra training that I got in business, but also through a good accountant, a good bookkeeper, good lawyer, like the more I'm learning from these people, the more I'm realizing I was losing money with some of these insurance contracts. And what am I doing? And then it started to bring in the clientele that wasn't truly who I wanted to work with. At that point, I would consider it as a hybrid practice. Again, back then, I don't think that was a term. We still had a lot of cash-based services, a lot of fitness and running services that we offered to people. We brought in a lot of technology like the Alter-G anti-gravity treadmill and all these other things that were happening. We always brought that in because that was going to bring these motivated people in the door. And always kept up on skills and, evidence-based stuff and, dry needling, instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization, movement assessments. We kept learning, and that was a big part of our culture as continuing education. So we just grew the service and the skill set to attract the people we wanted to attract. And then as far as marketing, I just went out and collaborated with people in the industry, right? I would show up to running stores and do free injury screens or teach a strengthening class geared towards runners. I collaborated with CrossFit gyms. I collaborated with just local fitness gyms and personal training studios, collaborated with massage therapists. We hosted events and brought people into our offices. So we just kind of grew it that way. And everything I did, I had, again, the runner was my avatar, but in niching down into the runner didn't limit my business. I mean, we were literally the place, and we had people from all over New England that came to us because we were the place that runners went. But what happened is people that aren't really runners knew we were treating, that clientele. And then they're a CrossFitter. They run during CrossFit and they want a motivated, sports medicine minded, healthy environment. So then they came, Then we started working with a local ballet studio because we were working with athletes, and ballet dancers are freaking athletes, man. They are so in shape. So we started working with ballet dancers. So niching down allowed me to grow the business, and we constantly kept that avatar in mind. And we literally had the best clients in the world. They were motivated. They did what we asked them to do. They took minimal visits to get them better, which maybe business-wise, some people would agree that would argue that's not a great thing. But they were referring to their training partners, their gym owners, their cousins, their brother, their sister, their mother. So it just took on this energy, which was nothing but positive. And my staff, I had people coming to want to work for us because they knew the people we were treating, because they wanted to work with motivated people.
Just to segue, or just to sidestep here just for a second, I'm like I said to you in the pre-show, I'm relatively new to the healthcare world, and one of the things I find really fascinating is that most of the content in the healthcare industry isn't great. It either doesn't exist, or on the other extreme, it's super buttoned up. It's got a bunch of people with a bunch of letters tacked onto the end of their name, talking in jargon to make it sound smarter. When I think about the clients that I know and the customers that we serve and the people I know in the industry, once you kind of turn off the camera and once you kind of they know that there's this is a private conversation, it's a very different conversation. It's like, oh my God, how am I going to make payroll? Oh my God, how am I going to get out of the day to day? So back to what you just said there, I think it's perfect the way you're talking about it, because these are probably the conversations that I would bet if somebody was sitting down with you and Jerry Durham for dinner, I bet these are the kind of conversations they could hear. But go to any healthcare related podcast or YouTube channel, and they're not going to hear this. So that's really great. You've sort of implied this, but I just want to confirm this avatar you had for runners. Was that why that? Were you a runner, or are you a runner, or was it something about it? Like what made you pick that avatar?
All right, so I'll make this story as brief as I can. So my wife's taking full credit for my career and success in the running world, because it started
understandably, yes.
As I would give it to her anyway. She doesn't have to pull it. I would push it that way. So what had happened is, I'd opened the business. I was still, I think I had just hired 1 or 2 people. So I was still treating there were times in the business where I was 80 hours a week. I was treating patients. Like I was hustling.
Yeah.
And giving
and
people.
This was when you were cash based and a bunch of
Right.
It's like attorney based claims and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I was hustling, and then she was out. She was just getting back into exercise again after having her child. She was at the local running store, and she was talking to this kid who was selling her the shoes, and he was, just making conversation with her. And there's a therapist, and she mentioned me, and I was literally a mile and a half up the road, just opened my clinic, and she's like, and he was hurt, and he was a former collegiate Division I runner. He was a legitimate runner. She got him to come see me. So thankfully I hit it out of the park with him and got him better in a couple of visits. I can't believe this. No one's ever talked to me about this, how my ankle affected my knee, how my weak glutes, blah, 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 the whole spiel. So then he sent me one of his training partners, who at the time was the NCAA champ cross country for the college at Providence College. And he was going to be at that time a future Olympian. Pretty serious injury, give him a full assessment, started building his treatment plan. And thankfully I did well with him too. So then he sends me someone else who just happens to be, at the time, he had almost every European record from the mile to the marathon. And he was arguably one of the best runners on earth at the time. And they just happened to be in Rhode Island, Little Rhodey, because of the coach at Providence College. So I was fortunate to be in that area. And thank God I did well with him. And then his wife was a 2-time Olympian from the U.S. And then it just started going. No, I was not a runner. I was a big meathead football player. I was pick things up, put things down, hit people hard with my head at stupid things, but that was me. I never ran a mile unless I got punished by my coach during football practice. My wife was a triathlete. That was kind of her world. So I got into it. So I became a triathlete, became a runner, and I got into this and realized I loved working with runners because they were all motivated. A lot of PTs and clinicians I don't want to work with runners. They're stubborn. Hell no, man. They're not stubborn. They've got energy. They're motivated. You channel that the right way, you use the right language, and then you can get them eating out of the palm of your hand. So that's how I fell into it. And thankfully, I had some success with it. I've had this conversation. I don't know if it was with Jerry, but that people say, follow your passion and you'll be successful. Sometimes when you become successful, you get passionate about it, right? I didn't get into this career thinking I was going to work with a bunch of skinny distance runners. I was a big meathead, right? Like I told you, how much do you bench press was my opening line every time I met someone. So getting into that was different. But when I saw the success, and then it became exciting because now I'm getting interviewed for magazines. I'm getting asked to speak all over the country because I worked with such and such an athlete. I'm collaborating with sneaker brands, and I'm like, I became the man in the area. So I felt really good. It fed my ego. It fed my bank account, it allowed me to grow the business. So I became passionate about it. And to this day, I still do some work with runners because it's literally been such a huge part of my career. So it wasn't intentional.
In another hat, I wear another hat on a day-to-day basis where I invest in a lot of startups every year and that sort of thing. And I'm a big believer that like one of the worst things we do to our youth is we implicitly and sometimes explicitly teach them to follow their passions or do what they love and things like that. I think it's the worst thing in the world because all the research points to the fact that you have to get good at something first. I mean, another way to say it is there's actually this book that I really love on this topic called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And the gist of this book, a wonderful book, and the gist of this book is that for you to make a living, you basically have to consider a Venn diagram of what you're good at, what you like to do, and what a lot of other people need, not want,
Right.
but need. And the intersection of those three circles is your career or your professional career anyway. And so anyway, I think it's interesting. The other thing that is very interesting listening to your story is that I'm fortunate to have known a lot of founders that not only went on to go turn into public companies and exit and stuff like that, but they implicitly, when they tell their stories, what you can see is that in hindsight, they didn't have to be absolutely right. They just needed to be directionally right. I've never had a healthcare profession like that, but I suppose in medical training, you need to be absolutely right because you could injure or worse, kill somebody in certain professions. And you almost have to have this ability to take that hat off and put on your entrepreneurial hat from time to time and know when to interchange them. Because in business, there's only two fatal mistakes you can make. One is you sign the wrong contract, and the second is you run out of money. Both of those are fatal mistakes. Everything else is fixable in business. I imagine it's very different for healthcare. But anyway, I think it's really fascinating. And you're a good example of, there's this saying that we have sort of in the investor community that niches get all the riches. There's actually a book with research on this topic called the Crossing the Chasm. And for the last 50 years or so, what the data suggests is that counterintuitively that small businesses need to go deep into a niche. If you can start to own that niche, you have the ability financially and otherwise to expand horizontally if you want to, which your story sort of confirms as well.
Right. And I learned that, and I guess my business was a testament to that unintentionally. Like I didn't read the book, although I want to get that name before we hang up. And that's what I'm trying to do with some of my clients now, like trying to get them to realize like niching down will allow them to grow in the same way that you're speaking of. In healthcare, you want to be exact. Like if we're making a diagnosis, we want to make sure we're pretty spot on because you don't want to do the wrong treatment. Thankfully, in outpatient sports medicine, it's very hard for you to hurt someone or kill someone, right? But you want to be close. But in business, like you need to wear a different hat. And so there's a few things that I've learned over the years and a few sayings. They're not mine, but I've stolen from someone. You don't have to be exact. It's kind of like horseshoes and hand grenades. You just got to be in the ballpark, right? And you'll accomplish the task. And then there's also one thing that I use, the term ready, aim, fire. So that was me most of my life, like ready, aim, prepare, make sure it's a perfect timing, make sure everything's aligned. I would have got nothing done in my career and I wouldn't have grown my business. So I went with the term ready, fire, aim. I'm like, no, let's just make this happen. Just go, and then we'll figure it out. We'll straighten out. We're all over the place with certain things, but we got going. We got some positive energy. We got momentum. It kept me and my staff happy and excited. And then whether it was a new program or open up another office or even working in the running world, just go. As long as you're in the right direction, like you said, you can straighten that out anytime along the way.
So you start the business, you're cash only, you're, just like you just said, you started this thing. Your wife says, hey, meet this runner. She says, what would the business look like if you accepted insurance? So you started going down this path. One of the other interesting parts of your story as I read about it is somewhere along the way, you started to kind of give your own therapists room to create training programs, courses. I'm probably making it sound more fancy than it was, but somewhere in there, I got the impression, or it seems like you started to understand like, okay, here's the portion of my business that's going to be cash pay. Here's the part of my business that's going to be insurance reimbursements. okay, well, somewhere in there, I've got to increase my margins. You may not have said it that way, but somewhere in there, you were thinking, okay, we've got to create something that our patients want in order to pay us more. Can you share a little bit about that? I mean, I don't want to, again, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but your story's already pretty rare. But then this idea of like trying to give your therapist room to create programs, I think gets it even more rare. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think of what you might be speaking of is, when you grow a team, and I'm going to preface this by saying I learned this the hard way. Because remember, I told you about I became successful in this world of running, and then I became passionate. It filled my ego. So I was the man. The mistake I made early on in my career was all about me and what I wanted you to do for me. And then because I used a business coach early on in my career too, another push from my wife. Thank God for my wife, because I wouldn't be here talking to you guys, But anyway, she was like, no, we need help, because we were growing fast. And through the coaching and consulting I got, I learned that, okay, I need to keep my staff happy. Not only do we need to provide for our clients, but I also need to keep my staff happy. So if I had someone who had an interest in golf, and we could develop a golf type of program, or even just a 2-hour clinic at night just to talk about golf injuries. Or we had a woman who was an overhead athlete, and that was her passion. So we do something to get people, overhead athletes, into the door. So again, we niche down to the runners, but by allowing them to do things they were passionate about. We had therapists who were gymnasts, so they reached out to local gymnastics studios and did work with them. We had dancers who reached out to local dance studios, did work with them. So it kept them passionate. It was more marketing, because a lot of this stuff is how I didn't have a marketing budget. I just sent my staff out and educated and to collaborate on little niches that they're passionate about, and then they brought these people back into us. So it's funny, because I had one of my offices, I had these like not cartoon, but like these, the Dunkin' Donuts runner guy in the Dunkin' Donuts logo.
Yeah.
So we had, I didn't realize how similar it was to the Dunkin' Donuts logo, but everyone commented in my office. But I had an image on the wall, a big one, of a runner. Then we started working with triathletes. Then I had the swimmer and the biker. Then we started working with dancers. So then I had a ballet dancer. And then we had a rower, because we started doing work with local rowing crews. Then a volleyball player. So we had all these different athletes building across the wall. And it wasn't because I went out and started bringing these people in, it's because my staff did. So on that note, it kept them happy, but also we needed to provide a service that was in need, right? So I talk about three things we need, and obviously you with a business background, it's going to make total sense. But it needs to be good for the business, the bottom line. It needs to be good for the employee, but it also needs to be good for the client. So if we develop a program or a new system that was great for me as the owner and the bottom line in the business, but my staff was working way too hard and it was a service that my clients didn't care about, it's not a win-win-win. So it's the thing about like the concentric circles that you're talking about. That sweet spot in the middle is we could satisfy all three of those areas, and I think we had a win-win program or a win-win system.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're in just roughly speaking, your timeline is 2003 to 2021, something like that.
Yeah.
So that 15, 16-year period, you kind of lived in the pre-social media world and in the post-social media world. So it's really fascinating, because like a lot of the stuff that you had to do in terms of getting out there is still part of the playbook now, I think, for practices all over the country. But there's access to more and more tools now that could get any practice owner much more reach. Like one of the things I don't know if you said this specifically, but I get the gist in our research about you that like you're a big believer that small private practices are going to save the profession. And I don't mean save like that's funny, or I was just trying to emphasize it, but like I generally agree with that. Like I think that when we think about venture capital and stuff like that, everybody seems to forget that every big business started out as a startup, and struggled to make its first $1,000 of revenue or $10,000 of revenue. So anyway, the point I'm just trying to poorly articulate is that, throughout the arc of business, what has not changed is what you have to do. What has changed is that more and more tools and platforms become available to allow you to kind of reach more and more people. I imagine that like in 2003, I mean, you and I were around running businesses back then. In 2003, like there was no Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. Your ability to get advice from somebody that had been in your shoes a year ago was limited by whether or not you were lucky enough to be physically located near them.
Right. And it's true. In starting, like when I started my practice, I was using paper charts. Remember
Right.
those?
Yes. Yeah.
There was no EMRs, there was no social media. So we grew it the way I talked about, but just getting out into the communities, which I think is underutilized with some people. And they're going right to social media and creating content, yet they've got this small community private practice that they're forgetting about. Finding resources was hard. Yeah, there were books, like you
Yeah.
can get, reach out and get books. And
Right.
I found the consultant I used, a friend of mine who owned a practice as well, he was reluctant to tell me his secret because he had a really successful practice. And we used to meet and just talk business stuff. He's like, well, I use this woman. I really don't give her name out much. I'm like, I need her name. My wife's making me get someone. Like, I need help. And she was amazing and was the best money I ever spent in my business. But I had to, like, just happened that I had someone who used one, but I couldn't find a business coach. That wasn't a very popular term back then. So it was hard to find those resources.
I genuinely am not trying to change the topic, but I think this brings up an interesting point that I think about a lot, probably maybe too much actually, is this idea that one of the worst things that has happened to the entrepreneurship world, whether you want to own a practice or build a chain of 15 practices or start any other business, one of the most idiotic pieces of advice that seems to be handed around is like, keep it secret. Keep it secret. You got to have an NDA. You got to have this. You got to have that. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, the reality is that for whatever reason, here we are in 2024, traction's really the only intellectual property any business has. Just to make the point here, if it really was about trade secrets, Facebook would have been beaten by now. Google would have been beaten by now. LinkedIn would have been beaten by now. But that is not it. The differentiator between any business winning and losing at this stage, and particularly I would say for the last 10 years of business in this country, it's about speed. It's about what you said earlier. It's ready, fire, aim. Or using the sports analogy, it's about the shots on goal. Everybody would like 100% accuracy, 100% hit rate for sure. But entrepreneurship looks more like a bar fight than a business plan. And people just don't get that. I love where you were going with, your 3 points there about it having to be good for the business, good for the employee, and good for the client. Can you share a little bit about what that looked like? Was that like a, and let me just imagine, like, you had a PT working for you and it's Mike or it's Stacy or whatever. And let's say they're a runner or something, like, are they creating like an ebook or something and then selling it to a patient? What did that look like?
We probably should have, but we didn't do anything like that. And none of my employees actually had products. So they developed programs or collaborations within the community, like I talked about before.
Okay, so that's like what you were kind of hinting at, where like, hey, I'll go to this running store and do a class or something. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's basically what I try to do is use what they were passionate about, and that was usually in one of the meetings we're trying to tease that out.
See, it's so fascinating when I talk to entrepreneurs like you, is that like, you've done stuff that in your mind is trivial because you've been there. Like you lived through it. You learned the hard way. And in your mind, like, hindsight being 2020, you called them collaborations earlier. Me coming from the outside and looking at your story, I called that a product, but I didn't know whether it was like an ebook or whatever. You just clarified that it was what you call a collaboration. So maybe I need to stop calling them a product. And it's interesting from a business standpoint. Every time you incentivize your staff to do this, whether you knew it or not, you were creating another place for the surface area of your business to grow, meaning more people saw you. Whether you knew it or not, the larger that surface area is, the higher the probability of luck striking you. That's the other thing people don't understand about entrepreneurship is they say, oh, well, Michael got lucky. Well, okay. There's a possibility that Michael got lucky working in his garage and the right opportunity drove past him. But I would bet that had you not started the practice and started dealing with all those workers' comp or whatever issues, if the practice had not been up and running at that point and your wife was in that running shop, she would have had nowhere to send that runner to.
You create some of the luck that you get.
I think people need to understand that you actually have more control over luck than you realize. I mean, certainly there are things that are out of your control, but for people that are listening to this podcast and people that are generally in the United States, there's more control than we'd like to admit. It's almost, I know we're going a little off topic here. I've been investing in businesses for almost 20, 25 years now. And one of the reddest flags I can tell from somebody is if I ask them something like, what do you think's holding you back? If they use the word they, THEY, if they use the word they anywhere, I just right away, I'm like, oh, red flag, red flag, red flag, because the word they absolves you of solving the problem because they are the problem.
It's not your problem when you use the word they, right?
Nobody wants to admit, like if I say, why did the patient not come to you? Why did the patient go to the other guy? Nobody wants to admit that like they had some control over that. You
Right.
know, they just, well, it's because they knew that other doctor. It's like, no. Like in your case, a runner wants a better outcome. Professionally, like if they're like a D1 athlete, they're not screwing around with this. They're already spending $300 on Nike Alpha Flies or whatever they're doing. They got carbon plated shoes. You know, what's an extra couple $100 to make sure that like they get every pound foot of torque out of that thing?
You know, someone told me once, and I use that phrase, like you can create your own luck, because I definitely got lucky with certain things in business. Like I had some rock star employees. They were amazing human beings. They were amazing team members, and they helped build and grow my business. Like, yeah, I interviewed them and I had a gut feeling about them and I brought them on board. So I guess that, it was my decision, but I did get lucky, right? Being located near a world-renowned distance running coach and having access to these high-level athletes who gave me more publicity, that was kind of lucky. I didn't move to Rhode Island trying to seek the proximity of a world-renowned coach, right? But being out there creating this, like I opened myself up for a lot of for luck,
Right.
I guess you should say.
Right.
And going back to something like it's true, like people don't want to share. Like I guess I'm getting old, and I'm turning into this old hippie. But I think what you put out in the world, or the universe, the energy you put out, you'll get back. Like I continually helped people. I tried to be the best employer I could. I tried to be the best therapist I could. My strategic partners or the collaborators I worked with, I tried to provide them more value than they gave me. That's just who I am. I'm an overprovider. I'm a pleaser. Maybe that's a downfall of mine. I'm not sure. But I think that combined with some luck and some just pure grit, like I grew up so poor and watched my dad was a huge inspiration for what he did in business, coming from an immigrant without a high school education. So, I think all those things combined allowed me to have a pretty fruitful, successful career. And that's how I got here where I am today.
So first of all, I want to honor that because that's a big deal. So I was an immigrant. We didn't have any money. My dad was a bricklayer. My mom was a bank teller. We weren't poor, but we certainly were not rich. The thing about it is that one of the things people don't realize is just that you remember like when we were all growing up, people would say there's no such thing as a dumb question. That's what they would say. They would say, well, Paul, there's no such thing as a dumb question. If you're thinking it, somebody else in the class is thinking it, ask the question. I'm here to tell you that somewhere after 2020, there are a ton of dumb questions. Because if you didn't Google it first and you want to waste my time or your time, if you're not willing to put in the work to answer the stupid, easy questions first, I'm not giving you any more time. Not because I'm a horrible person, but because like, if you can't solve a 1-inch hurdle in front of you, why should I invest my time? I could spend the time with my kids instead. I'd rather do that, And so, here we are in 2024. The vast majority of questions that a new practice owner has really ought to be answerable through Google, through your content online, Jerry's content online, mine, whatever. And to your point, we just give. And believe it or not, that's a bigger differentiating moat than people realize. Another way to say this is people will be like, so I'll talk to like practice owners and I'll say, well, what do you think your differentiator is? And they'll say, well, I have this proprietary, whatever. And I'm like, okay. So my view on this is that in any industry where it does not cost you more than $1 million of investment to get to your first customer, a patent is useless because it doesn't save you from anything. For me as a customer, I don't actually care whether you went to George Mason University versus Providence or whatever. If I've got a running injury, and depending on where I'm at, it's probably some function of who can get me in faster, who has the track record to get me the results. And then I find a way to balance that out. And, I know I'm just one kind of client, but the point is that the business moat is not, some proprietary ebook or standard operating procedure. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot and you can take a pass on this if you want. So we're recording this, in the middle of 2024. if you started a new practice today, knowing what you know today without any financial baggage of the last 20 years or whatever, if you started your practice today, do you think it would still take you 15, 16, 17 years to get to multiple locations and get to an exit?
No.
And I asked that question of every business owner that's exited, and they all say the same thing as you. And so I'm going to just go one step further and make the assumption that that speed, that speed that you so confidently just agreed that you could utilize now was probably not related to like some proprietary way you think about it. It's really more like it's what you know now to avoid. You know now to avoid certain common mistakes. So let's maybe use that to segue into what you're doing now. So now you're helping practices, advising them, coaching them, that sort of thing. I think it'd be cool if you could tell us a little bit about what you do. And then the question I really want to ask is like, you've been around enough businesses now, enough practices. Like, let's start with what are you working on now? And then I'd love to kind of use that to segue into like, what are common mistakes you see early practice owners make, or what advice you give them. So let's see where you go with this.
So it's funny, you mentioned something about mistakes. I guess what I'm doing now is I'm a master mistake avoider is what I'm trying to get with my clients, right? And you mentioned, you must have read it somewhere. I'm literally like trying to save our profession. I'm not saying save as a quote to you because when you use the word, but I can't save my profession single-handedly, right? But my mission right now is to empower as many passionate private practice owners as I can to start and grow a successful private practice, right? I think that people can avoid burnout, really enjoy their career, continue to provide the services to a niche or community that they want to keep them in this profession, to do what brought them to this profession to begin with, right? Most people don't go into physical therapy to become multimillionaires or billionaires because it's hard to do that in our profession. But we're all drawn to this for our calling, and I'm trying to help people do that. And how am I doing that? Is trying to not only just motivate people. There's a difference between easy and simple, right? It's not easy to start up a private practice. It's not easy to grow a private practice. But it's pretty simple when you get the basics. What I'm trying to do is give people some structure, give people some coaching, some motivation to whether they're starting it or growing, or if theirs isn't quite performing as well, trying to come in and figure out what's going on. Because as you've probably seen a million times and know, you've talked to Jerry a whole bunch, if you're not working on preventing cancellations, or for me, it's like finding your avatar, finding your niche. What are you passionate about? Starting there, so you get a group of people that want your services and you want to provide services to them, creating this positive energy, creating a great environment for this person that you're trying to see, a great customer experience. Those cancellation rates, those types of things will go down. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to work with PTs who want to stay in the profession, who might be feeling burnt, start their practices. I think we would keep a lot of really skilled, fine human beings in our profession and not going off to do medical device sales like I almost did 3 years into my career. And that's what I'm trying to do. I think ideally for me, it's someone who's starting off and's never had it and just needs some coaching or consulting and the steps to actually follow and the mistakes to avoid. Like you asked, like what's a common mistake I see? And I think most clinic owners are guilty of this at one point or another. It's thinking you need to accept all insurance contracts, think you need to go wide, cast a wide net versus niching down or not accepting those payers that aren't providing the reimbursement that you need to have a successful, or just to keep your doors open, never mind have a successful business. Another mistake I think people make is they do the old, and I can't believe people are still doing this, where they're trying to go into doctors' waiting rooms and bring fruit baskets and bagels. Really? We're still doing this? I got to be honest, I went into one physician's office in my whole career. And I did it because I had a manager in one of my offices, and she really wanted to meet this doctor, and we kind of collaborated. We went in, we brought lunch, and I was almost like didn't want to do it because I've never done it before. And we built a practice not doing that because I think there's better ways to use your time, money, and resources, right? But we did it. And besides that, like we went right to the grassroots, to the people, who are we trying to serve? We provided value. We provided education. We let them know we were here. We're the services we're providing, whether cash pay or insurance, are going to help them. And that's how we get all the people in. Can I tell you a quick story? This is a good story.
I would love it. This is great.
So the title of this story is, Are You Giving My Patients Chocolate? And I'll tell you where this comes from. It was a few years into my career. I think I was on the verge of opening my second office, but I had one booming office and was right outside of Providence, Rhode Island, in a town, Pawtucket. But anyway, my front desk comes to me. I'm in my office, and they said, "Hey, doctor," we'll call him Doctor Who. I don't want to use any specific names, but Doctor Who's on the phone. He said he needs to speak with you. So, as a therapist, when a doctor calls, you immediately go, "Oh, what did I do wrong? What patient, did I screw up a patient?" So I got a little butterfly in my belly. I'm like, "Oh, why is Doctor Who calling me?" And I've never met Doctor Who. So Doctor Who gets on the phone. "Hey, Michael, this is Doctor Who." I'm like, "Hey, Doc, what's going on? What can I do for you?" He said, "I got an important question." And I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Are you giving all my patients chocolate?" And I was like, "Don't get the question." And then he literally said, "How come every patient that sees you guys and ends up in my office loves you? Why does every patient think you guys are the best?" And I was like, oh. First of all, I had to hold back tears because I was like, yes, it's working, right? This is a physician who they have a whole chain of private of PT clinics. So one, I wanted to tell him what our secret sauce was, but two, I didn't want to tell him because I don't want him to change what they're doing, because then we won't, they're going to steal our patients. So we had a great conversation, and it came down to one, we were a very manual based clinic. I believe in the power of touch, the healing power of touch. I think manual skills are needed, especially with the running world, certain running injuries. So we were very manual based. A lot of these high volume clinics are not manual based. It's like, do your straight leg raises in the corner, you stretch your calf, you do your home exercises that you do in the home anyway, but I'm going to charge your insurance company and you're going to pay me a copay just so I can watch you do it. All that, part of my French, but crappy, not personalized care. So I said, we touch your patients, and this is what everyone, if they need, we start with some manual focus, then we transition them. And I said, we also give them a good experience. When they come here, we treat them like they are the most important person in the clinic. And he's like, "Really? It's that simple?" I said, "I've got no other secrets for you, Doc. This is how we run our show here." So I thought that was going to be the end of it. Now, Doctor Who never sent us specific patients because, again, he had his own clinic. But guess who I started getting referrals from? Doctor Who. Doctor Who sent me his family, colleagues, friends, people who he wanted to get a better experience.
The people he cared about.
Yes. So he didn't even send them to his own clinic. And then I literally, at one point, we have a big orthopedic practice here in the state of Rhode Island, and I was seeing a lot of those surgeons and a lot of their families. And I said, if I had any balls, I would make a commercial and say, "Why don't you come? We're all the Doctor Who's are coming for their therapy because that's who we're seeing." And I took it as a compliment, and we never made a thing of it because I didn't want to burn any bridges. But I've got a great relationship now, still to this day, with many, many doctors. We've treated so many physicians, but they wanted a good experience. And I just thought that was huge. And again, it's not because I brought them fruit basket or bagels for the office, because I didn't. It's just because what we did. And they were hearing about us through their patients. So literally, doctors learned about us because the patients we sent out, if we needed to send to a physician, told them about the experience they had with us. So that's my chocolate story.
I think it underscores yet another sort of common thing that I see across business, is that this idea that when you started that story, you talked about people going into the waiting room and dropping off fruit baskets. That tactic probably worked at some point, but it stopped working when it became the tactic everybody used. And the reality is that what people don't realize from a marketing standpoint is that these days we're fighting a war for attention. We were all, I'm sure, I won't speak for you, but I will just say, at least when I was going to school and growing up, a big part of growing up was learning manners. I'm doing quotes here because people would say, well, you have to pay attention. You have to give somebody the attention. You have to take every phone call. You have to respond to every email. Even on my own team now, sometimes people say, "Hey, Paul, I emailed you. You didn't answer or you didn't reply." And my response is maybe it didn't deserve a response. There are a million other things going on. Just because I have an email doesn't mean you get to derail my day. Here's where I'm going with this, is that in order to start a business, you also have to not fight fair. You have to kind of do something that other people aren't doing, because it's easier to kind of wedge in and fight for attention in a different area. In your case, it was word of mouth. Providence, I've been up to Providence a couple times, and to me, as an outsider, still has that small town feel. And word of mouth, I think, is a much more viral way of starting early on. Not to say that Like, I think if you had expanded to 15, 20 clinics, I imagine you were going to do pay-per-click ads and all sorts of stuff like bigger businesses do. Like, I think if you had started more traditionally and done fruit baskets and pay-per-click advertising and flyers under wiper blades outside of doctors' offices, it would have cost you a whole lot, but the ROI wouldn't have been there. But again, your hindsight's 2020, right? So you're thinking, you're telling the story about chocolate, and it's a great story again. But I would bet money that if I could time travel back to when you decided to run that tactic, I have a feeling that you would have said, I'm not wasting more money on a damn fruit basket.
I was frugal, and I didn't have confidence and enough knowledge in like marketing and sales and that type of thing. And I just did, it was working for us. It was the old school, which is also why I think now I could grow a practice faster, because I did things a certain way that was safe. But I didn't take out my first loan until I was like 8 or 9 years already into business. I didn't put my personal financial health and my family in jeopardy. So that made me comfortable. Was it the smartest business decision? Should I have borrowed some money and grew faster? Maybe I should have, right? Depending on the business person, they might say yes, use other people's money. But anyway, that's what I knew that was working for us. It felt good for me. I laid my head on the pillow at night and knew I was doing the best I could for my team and my clients, and my family was safe, so it worked.
I know we're a little over time, but can I just maybe I want to make one more comment and see where you go with this, if you have another few minutes.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so you said something earlier that I disagree with. And I'll preface this by saying that there is no right and wrong in business. I think ultimately the results speak for themselves. And frankly, there's more than one way to build a business, build a career, or whatever. Something you said today is something I hear quite a bit amongst other practice owners around the country. And that is it's some combination of what you said earlier, where you said it's hard to make a big amount of money in this business. It's hard to become a billionaire in this business. You said something along those lines a few minutes ago. I mean this with all the respect in the world. I disagree with this statement, because if that was true, private equity would not be in this industry trying to scoop up practices. I disagree with that statement, because if that was true, the big health systems would not be buying up private practices, right? I could keep rambling about this. I guess where I'm going with this is, the reason I disagree with that statement is because I think the reason there are not more financially successful, very large, individually owned practices or owner finance practices like yours is because as an industry, we've convinced each other that it can't happen. And I guess what I'm just trying to say is that, and this is not a comment or reflection on you, but a comment I just want to make about the broader industry, is that private equity people aren't dumb. They're here for a reason. The big health systems aren't dumb. They're here for a reason. Basically, everybody else in the industry understands that physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, everybody understands that healthcare as a whole is a finance business that happens to provide healthcare. And I know that's like an icky thing to say out loud, but I just want to say this because I want to tie it back to what you said earlier as well. Like, small practices are going to save the profession. In fact, small practices, I think, are the only thing that provide pressure to the industry to keep innovating. You don't have to take my word for it. This is how every other industry has moved forward. Like IBM, like if all innovation in every industry came from the incumbent, we'd still have Kodak. But Kodak filed for bankruptcy on the same day, effectively, that, gosh, I can't remember that photo startup, but that photo startup went public. You know, my point is that like, execution's a big part of being successful in practice ownership, but vision and optimism and sort of that, like, why not me? Why not us? Like, that also needs to exist, because, you know, had you not decided to sell, which you probably had very good reasons to sell, right? You're going to do other stuff, take time back with the kids. That's totally fair. But I think that this industry is so large. Here's the thing. I tell people I'm a blood-sucking capitalist. I openly admit it. My wife says I can't enjoy anything because every time I like go to a store or whatever, I'm like, how'd they set that price? Why is it this? Who makes money on this? Why am I, So I thought a big exit. So I've invested in over 3,000 companies now. In our industry, if a company gets $1 billion exit, man, everybody's high-fiving each other. We're all happy with the outcome. It's a lot of money for everybody. We're so happy. But then I like look at the healthcare industry and like, this industry in particular, PT, OT, speech, or whatever, the biggest players in this industry are doing like $1 billion profits per quarter. Like they eclipse the technology industry. And then I hear practice owners like, man, it's hard to make a buck in this industry. We can't become millionaires. I'm like, are you kidding me? We have this other practice owner who's done very well. And I asked him the other day, I said, he's up to like 8 or 9 practices now. He said something very similar. I was like, when are you going to open your next practice? He's like, oh, I'm getting there. It's hard or whatever. And I kind of know his interests or whatever. And I said, hey man, you like private jets? And he's like, yeah. I was like, who do you think buys all these private jets? Like I pulled up FlightAware, that website or whatever. And then in FlightAware, you can like set a filter that hides all commercial traffic. And so when you hide all commercial traffic, like United, all the big carriers, you see this globe. Like when you turn that off, what you realize is there's more private jets flying out there than there are commercial jets. And so I said to him, who do you think's on those airplanes? He was like, oh, well, it's probably all celebrities. I was like, are you kidding me? There's like only one Kim Kardashian. There's one Travis Kelce. There's one. The vast majority of private jet sales go to agricultural farmers, timber, guys that like cut timber in the Pacific Northwest, people that sell a ton of pools across the East Coast. Like you can go look at the registrations and see who owns these things. Anyway, all I'm just trying to say is that I think that I'm really bullish on the industry. And I think that the thing that I agree with the most that you've said throughout this is that it is more small practices that are going to figure this out. And a subset of those small practices are going to have the vision and the ambition to ask themselves, why can't we be larger? Why can't we, go from 3 to 30 locations? What would it take to get there? Okay, one other story, by the way, because I say this all the time. So I live in the Washington, D.C. metro area near Dulles Airport, and Dulles Airport is a big United Airlines hub. So I just fly them a lot, right? And I'll just use United as an example. The question I'll ask people all the time, particularly other practice owners, when I ask them this question and they say, oh, well, it's hard to make money in this industry. I'll say, okay, so what product does United Airlines sell that makes them not only the most money, but the most profit? And then they say the obvious answer. Well, they sell travel. They sell seats on airplanes. And I'm like, wrong. So you have to, every public company in the United States, if you're on the stock market, you have to file a public report every quarter that is publicly available, and you have to explain how you made all this money. United Airlines makes more money on the credit card that it peddles than the flights it takes. Flying aircraft is the loss leader. What they really want you to do is to sign up for the credit card to get the 2 bags free every year, because the interest payments are really where the money's at. And they're not a fluke. Starbucks makes more money in their public earning reports. They make more money on the float of the Starbucks card. Starbucks is a bank disguised as a coffee shop. And I think that's the future of private healthcare, private practices and all that, is that the minute I can help more and more practice owners believe that you can not only help these patients live a better life, a healthier life and all that, but the minute you believe you can do that while also recognizing that your practice is a financial organization, the sooner you can start to maybe connect the dots with this idea that there is a way to make a lot more money in this industry. Ultimately, whoever controls the patient experience, whoever controls where that patient's going to go, what they experienced, who else they trust, whoever really unlocks that is going to be in a better position to then leverage it however they want. But I love your story though, man, because it's already rare to start a practice and be successful. Then it's even rarer to kind of grow it to a couple locations. And then it's even rarer to sell it successfully and be on good terms. And so you've got this amazing story. I know I've taken a lot of your time here. And I hope we can do another episode here to get some more out of this. But if people want to find you, we're going to put a bunch of your links in the show notes so people can find you. But where, in your own words, do you want them to send you a DM on LinkedIn, email?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active in for social media, because I am old and I'm trying to embrace social media, but I'm not very good at it. So LinkedIn, you can find me, Michael J. Silva, but also my website is Michael J. Silva, SILVA.com. So those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. And I'd love to just meet people who are even considering growing, starting in this profession, and I'd love to be a resource for them, for sure.
I love it, man.
Yeah,
I love it.
Can I go back to something what you just talked about?
Yeah.
Whether it goes
yes, please.
or not. So I don't know what the schooling is like now, But this is why when I started off, I said, welcome to healthcare and thank you for being here, because we're not trained to have that mindset as far as business, right? So they're training these people to be a cog in the wheel, go get a job for a hospital system or go get a job, but they're not trained to do that. And I agreed with everything you said. And there is a lot of money in healthcare. Obviously, you're right. I mean, VC would not be here. They've got plenty of places they can invest their money. I get it. You wouldn't be here if you didn't see an opportunity. You're a businessman, right? But most people get into it because of the calling to help people. They don't think about this business side, and you need extra coaching, consulting, training. My consultant I use helped me think about my business in a different way. And then I went on. I don't know if think we talked about this, but I was part of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So I was part of that. And I tell you what, it was like a mini MBA that I got, which set me up to change the way I looked at my business, to make me the least revenue generating employee in my company so that my exit strategy would not involve me having to come in and treat patients when I did that. But I had to seek out this extra training, and I got a bookshelf of books of things that I tried to do, like from hospitality and the hotel industry to, business to, the compound effect, whatever it is. I read all these books and I had to seek out that knowledge because it wasn't our business class in PT school was a freaking joke. It didn't prompt us to do that. And so I think most people don't get into it seeing that opportunity, but visionaries and people from outside of it see the opportunity and see what can really happen in this industry.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strata Stories. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how our EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.